I moved into Riverside Meadows 3 years ago, thinking I'd found the perfect suburban sanctuary. The neighborhood was quiet, the houses were beautiful, and the community seemed friendly enough. What I didn't realize was that our HOA president, Karen Whitmore, treated the entire development like her personal fiefdom. I'm a corporate attorney specializing in real estate and contract law, but I kept that information to myself. I preferred to keep my work life and home life separate. My house was my retreat, a place where I could forget about depositions and litigation. Karen was in her early 50s, with that particular hairstyle that screamed "I demand to speak to the manager" and a wardrobe that consisted entirely of athletic wear despite never actually exercising. Her husband, Richard, was a quiet insurance broker who seemed to shrink a little bit more each time his wife opened her mouth. The first few months were peaceful. I paid my HOA dues on time, kept my lawn immaculate, and minded my own business. Then I made the mistake of parking my car on the street overnight when my garage door opener broke. The next morning, there was a formal citation taped to my windshield, along with a $100 fine. I thought it was excessive, but I paid it and moved on. That was my first mistake. Karen saw compliance as weakness, and weakness as an invitation. Before you hear how this all unfolds, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this channel for more stories about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. And if you're enjoying this so far, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and who knows? Your story might be featured next. The citations kept coming. My trash cans were 2 inches too far from the curb. My mailbox needed repainting, even though I'd painted it 4 months earlier. My porch light was too bright and causing light pollution. Each infraction came with a fine, and each fine was promptly paid. I was busy with a major case at work and didn't have the energy to fight over petty nonsense. But Karen was just getting started. She began scheduling property inspections with 24 hours notice, showing up with a clipboard and that smug smile, circling my house like a shark looking for blood in the water. She'd measure the length of my grass with a ruler. She'd take photos of cobwebs in the corners of my porch. She'd run her finger along my fence looking for peeling paint. One Saturday afternoon, I was having a small gathering. Nothing crazy, just 6 friends on my back patio, music at a reasonable volume, everyone gone by 9 p.m. At 8:30, Karen appeared at my fence line with a decibel meter. I kid you not, an actual decibel meter. She announced that we were in violation of the noise ordinance and that she'd be filing a formal complaint. When I politely explained that the ordinance didn't begin until 10 p.m. on weekends, she literally stamped her foot and said, "The spirit of the rule is peace and quiet, and I am not at peace." My friends left shortly after, embarrassed by the confrontation. That's when I decided to do some digging. I started attending HOA meetings, something I'd avoided before. That's where I noticed something interesting. Karen always left the meetings at exactly 7:30, like clockwork, claiming she had to get home to Richard. But one evening, I saw her car at the coffee shop across town at 8 p.m. She was with a man who definitely wasn't Richard. They were sitting very close, very intimate. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was innocent. But then it happened again. And again. Always the same night as HOA meetings. Always leaving at 7:30 sharp. Always meeting the same man. I'm not proud of what I did next, but Karen had made my life miserable for months, and I was curious. I hired a private investigator. It cost me $2,000, but what he found was worth every penny. Karen had been having an affair for 8 months with Brad Henderson, a personal trainer from the gym she claimed to attend 3 times a week. The investigator provided photos, time-stamped videos, hotel receipts, the whole package. Professional, thorough, and completely legal. Everything obtained in public spaces or through publicly available information. I sat on this information for a week, unsure what to do with it. I'm not a blackmailer, and I didn't want to destroy someone's marriage out of spite. But then Karen went too far. She issued a citation claiming my house color was not in compliance with HOA standards. My house was beige. Specifically, it was desert sand, color number 47 on the approved HOA palette. I had the documentation. I'd literally chosen it from their list when I repainted 2 years ago. When I showed Karen the approval form with her own signature on it, she said, "Well, it looks different now. Perhaps it's faded. You'll need to repaint." The fine was $1,500, plus the cost of repainting. That's when I stopped being defensive and started playing offense. I requested a formal HOA hearing to dispute the fine. It was my right under the bylaws, and Karen couldn't deny it. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday, and I came prepared. I had paint samples, professional color analysis, the original approval documents, and photos taken in various lighting conditions proving my house was the exact color it was supposed to be. The HOA board, which consisted of 5 members including Karen, reviewed my evidence. It was clear to everyone that I was right. Everyone except Karen, who insisted, the guidelines are subject to interpretation, and as president, my interpretation carries weight. That's when I played my first card. Actually, Karen, according to Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws, disputes regarding property standards must be decided by majority vote of the board, not executive decision. I slid copies of the relevant bylaw across the table to each board member. Karen's face went red, but she couldn't argue with her own rules. The vote was 4-1 in my favor. My fine was rescinded. But I wasn't done. I'd also like to raise a concern about some inconsistencies I've noticed in the HOA finances. I had spent the previous week analyzing 3 years of HOA financial statements, which were public record for all homeowners. Karen's eyes went wide. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "Well," I said calmly, "I noticed that we've paid the same landscaping company, Green Thumb Services, approximately $8,000 per month for the past 2 years. That's $96,000 annually for a development with only 42 homes. I did some calling around, and comparable services should cost us about half that. I also noticed that Green Thumb Services is registered to a Bradley Henderson. I'm curious if the board was aware of this potential conflict of interest." The room went silent. Brad was Karen's boyfriend, and she'd been funneling HOA money to him for 2 years. Even better, she'd never disclosed this relationship to the board, which was a direct violation of the HOA's conflict of interest policy. One of the other board members, Margaret Chen, asked to see my documentation. I handed over a neat folder containing business registration records, payment histories, and competitive quotes from 3 other landscaping companies. Margaret's expression darkened as she reviewed the materials. "Karen, did you know about this relationship?" Margaret asked. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Well, I might have, but that doesn't mean, the quality of work is excellent, and I don't see how," Karen stammered. "Actually," I interrupted, "there's more. I have documentation showing that Karen has been meeting with Mr. Henderson regularly over the past 8 months, often immediately after our HOA meetings. I have photos of them together at restaurants, at hotels, entering and leaving the same room." I placed a selection of the investigator's photos on the table. Not the most intimate ones, just enough to make the point crystal clear. The board members leaned in to look, and I watched the color drain from Karen's face. "You had me followed?" she whispered. "No, Karen. A private investigator documented your activities in public places, which is completely legal. You see, when you started harassing me with frivolous fines and citations, I decided to do my due diligence. What I found was a pattern of ethical violations and financial impropriety that this board needs to address." Margaret took charge immediately. "I move that we suspend Karen from her duties as president pending a full financial audit and investigation into these allegations." The motion was seconded and passed 4-0, with Karen too shocked to even vote. But I still wasn't finished. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with the board to conduct a comprehensive review. The audit revealed that Karen had approved over $200,000 in payments to companies owned by Brad or his family members over 3 years. Some were legitimate services, but they were all overpriced by 50 to 100%. She'd also approved several emergency repairs to common areas that were never actually performed. The invoices were fake, the work was never done, and the money disappeared. With this evidence in hand, the HOA board had no choice but to remove Karen from her position permanently and file a civil lawsuit against her to recover the misappropriated funds. But here's where things got really interesting. Remember how I mentioned I'm a corporate attorney? My firm has a division that handles real estate fraud. I offered to represent the HOA pro bono. Karen hired her own attorney, some overpriced blowhard who tried to claim that the financial irregularities were just bookkeeping errors and that Karen had no knowledge of Brad's business relationships. That argument fell apart when we deposed Brad, who, faced with potential fraud charges himself, threw Karen completely under the bus. He testified that Karen had explicitly directed HOA contracts to his companies and that they'd split the excess profits. He provided emails, text messages, and even recordings of phone conversations where Karen discussed how much they could inflate invoices without raising suspicion. The civil case was straightforward. Karen was ordered to repay $215,000 to the HOA, plus legal fees and damages. Her homeowner's insurance didn't cover fraud, so this was coming directly out of her pocket. But the real devastation came from an unexpected source. Richard. Poor, quiet Richard, who'd been married to Karen for 26 years and had no idea his wife was having an affair. He filed for divorce immediately after the affair became public knowledge at the HOA meeting. And here's the beautiful part. Because Karen had committed fraud and depleted marital assets through her relationship with Brad, Richard's attorney argued that she should receive nothing in the divorce settlement. The judge agreed. Richard got the house, which he immediately listed for sale because he couldn't stand to live in Riverside Meadows anymore. He got their savings, their retirement accounts, everything. Karen got nothing except debt and disgrace. But I saved the best for last. See, I'd been talking with some developer friends of mine, successful people who knew how to spot opportunity. Riverside Meadows had been built on what was originally a much larger plot of land. The developer had kept one parcel, about 3 acres, adjacent to our development but technically outside the HOA boundaries. It had been for sale for 2 years with no buyers because it was landlocked, accessible only through a private easement that ran along the edge of the development. That easement was controlled by the HOA. I bought the property for a steal, $200,000, well below market value. Then I submitted a proposal to the HOA board to develop it into a mixed-use space, a coffee shop, a small gym, a yoga studio, and a dog park. All things the community had wanted but Karen had blocked for years because she didn't want commercial traffic near her house. The board loved the idea and approved my development plan unanimously. But here's the kicker. Karen's house, the one Richard was selling, was the property directly adjacent to my new development. The construction noise alone would make it nearly impossible to sell at a good price. But more than that, the coffee shop I was building? I was leasing it to a local business owner for $1 a year, with the understanding that it would be a community gathering space. The gym? Leased to a fitness cooperative. The yoga studio? Run by a nonprofit that offered free classes to seniors. The dog park? Open to the public. I wasn't making any money off this development. That wasn't the point. The point was that Karen's house, which she needed to sell to pay her legal debts, was now next to a commercial area with constant activity. The property value dropped by 30% overnight. Richard's realtor called me, furious, demanding I halt construction. I politely explained that I'd followed every rule, obtained every permit, and had full HOA approval. There was nothing illegal or even unethical about what I was doing. Karen tried to attend an HOA meeting to protest, but she was no longer a member of the board and had no standing. She stood up during the public comment period, red-faced and shaking, and screamed that I was doing this to punish her, that I was a vindictive monster, that she'd sue me for harassment. I smiled calmly and said, Karen, I'm simply developing my property in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations. If you have a legal objection, I encourage you to consult with your attorney. Oh, wait, you can't afford one anymore, can you? The room fell silent. Margaret actually gasped. Karen's hands were trembling as the full scope of what I'd done finally hit her. She'd lost her position, her reputation, her marriage, her money, and now even the chance to sell her house for enough to cover her debts. All because she couldn't resist the urge to harass me over parking violations and paint colors. All because she thought she was untouchable. All because she never considered that the quiet lawyer she'd been tormenting might actually know how to fight back. I watched as Karen stood there, frozen, her face cycling through shock, rage, and finally, complete devastation as she realized she'd been outplayed at every single turn, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. If you enjoyed watching Karen get exactly what she deserved, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. And if you want more stories about entitled people facing epic consequences, subscribe to Karen Eat World. Drop a comment and let me know what you think Karen's biggest mistake was, because honestly, she made so many. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.